This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoy this critical thought, your daily discussion on game design. And be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and you can pitch future critical thought topics. Alright everybody, in honor of Mass Effect Andromeda, I believe either out right now or I think people who have EA Access are playing it early, I figure this is a great time to talk about the ever favorite topic of morality sliders in video games. Now, in our look at kind of like the history or CRPG versus JRPG, or as they're now more commonly known as Western RPGs, BioWare really rose to popularity and basically clout during the early thousands with the release of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And as we talked about, this was a very big deal when it came to the company and Western RPG design. For the most part, RPGs up until KOTOR kept within the fantasy genre, again, Dungeons and Dragons, PnP, that kind of thing. At least in the West, as JRPG fans know, we of course got games like Chrono Trigger and everybody's favorite Earthbound, but that's another topic easily. But when it came to Knights of the Old Republic, BioWare had the freedom to move away from the traditional pen and paper designs and, of course, the pen and paper genres. We were away from Neverwinter Nights, Icewind Dale, and we were in the galaxy far, far away. And we could easily have an entire talk just on KOTOR itself, but I want to focus on what it kind of popularized with the morality slider system, or we could just say a morality system in video games. Now, on the off chance that you're watching this and you don't know what we're talking about, morality sliders or a morality system is essentially a way for the game to judge the player's actions and reward or punish them accordingly. And there are many, many, many examples of this, especially with the industry's penchant for catching or latching onto a popular system and then everyone using it. You can look at examples like Call of Duty and military shooters, cover-based systems, and another favorite genre or favorite mechanic, QTEs. But sticking with morality sliders, the idea, of course, is in these games you'll have, good choices, evil choices for fans of Mass Effect, Paragon, Renegade, etc. And the idea is that certain actions or certain choices you make during the story will raise or lower your morality bar. Of course, higher up it goes, you're doing good. Lower you go, you're being an SOB, basically. And this is a system that I am not a huge fan of. And I may already know the answer to this, but for those of you watching this, did you enjoy the morality system of games during the thousands? We could even argue some of the games still today. The problem goes back to a topic when we talked about video game writing, and that could easily fill multiple critical thoughts. The problem with morality sliders in video games is that it's a very binary way of looking at the moral choices of a game. And I know we've talked about this in an earlier critical thought as well. I think I brought up the Shin Megami Tensei series as a counterpoint. But the problem when it comes to this is that no matter how you're really playing the game, only certain actions are impacting your morality. You can go around and kill 50 people, but if you donate to a church or, the religion of the game, that will compensate for it. And many video games just felt this is where that kind of video game logic really can be seen, or when mechanics get in the way of telling a story. We've talked about the other very popular example of the world's going to end because someone's going to destroy the sun, but you still have 8 hours to do all the side quests and bonus content to your heart's desire. When it comes to the morality system in video games, there are very few examples, I can't even think of any in my mind, of games that actually made this work. Now, there are some very rare exceptions, and I want to talk about games that try to do things a little bit differently. The Deus Ex series would probably be a good example of this, at least during the play of the game, and how different choices will impact things, but it wasn't always readily apparent what they did. This would be a big difference from games like the Telltale series that, of course, gives you that little box that says, so-and-so will remember that. The idea of what makes a good morality system and the hallmark of it goes back to the idea of soft and hard choices, and I know we have certainly talked about that here several times. But to reiterate, a soft choice is something that doesn't impact the path through the game at all. It may affect things short term, like whether a character will wear a blue dress or a red dress, while a hard choice is a permanent variant on the game. So if you've played The Walking Dead, I'm going to spoil the game slightly here, but in the first scene of the game, or in the first chapter, you have to choose between saving the woman or the man. I forget their actual names. And then that will affect who's with you for the next few chapters. That would be an example of a hard choice, because once you've made that, you can't unmake that. It is going to affect everything down the line. And as you've seen with the Telltale formula over the last few years, every chapter will usually have at least one major hard choice, and the game, shows off in the most extravagant way possible. The guy in the middle of the screen, you see these massive options on left and right of you. Now, other games we've also seen this in action games as well, such as Infamous, Dante's Inferno, and I'm pretty sure there are more than I'm forgetting right now. And this is where, again, that video game logic really gets in the way of morality. The problem is that you have choices that are limited based on whether you're light side, dark side, good, evil, again, whatever you want. And the issue is it basically punishes you for being neutral, because the best skills are always at the extremes of the spectrum. So if you're going to stay in the middle, you're going to lose out on the enhancements. And this is kind of the issues of when morality gets in the way, because it becomes less about the choices and more about you gaming the system. One of the things that I liked about Deus Ex was that the choices that you made that affected the story didn't impact the gameplay in the sense of giving you new abilities. It gave you experience, but experience was a catch-all. It didn't matter if you were being an SOB or you were being, Mother Teresa. Your choices still gave you a flat experience, and you were free to do whatever you want with it. Essentially, the gameplay of Deus Ex wasn't impacted by the morality of it. And as we talked about before, a major counterpoint and another example where we mock morality in games was from BioShock. And I know we've talked about this one before. When it came to BioShock, of course, it went that the second you harvested a little sister for Adam, you're pure evil, scum of the earth. You're going to basically lead a rebellion to take over. If you don't do that, then you are the kindest man in the world, you are the savior, yada yada yada. And of course, this brings up the major failings of morality in video games, and that is the shades of gray. And we've talked about this one before, but doing the right thing for the wrong reasons or doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. One of the best things about some of the better TV shows we've seen today and movies have been dealing with characters who aren't just 100% good or 100% evil. As we saw with the idea of, a Black Ops team in Rogue One, and multiple Marvel shows on Netflix and FX and all that stuff. But the idea is that morality isn't just, 100% good, 100% evil, because that leads to boring storytelling. If someone is always going to do the right thing, they are goody-goody two-shoes, then where is the conflict? Likewise, a villain who's just, the mustache twirling, I'm going to do evil, because mwahaha, then where is the interest there? And we have certainly seen examples of interesting villains in TV shows, movies, especially with what they've been trying to do more with the Marvel Cinematic Universe with someone like Loki, and they haven't really been managed to do anything better since, but who knows what will happen in the future. But the point is that a good villain has some semblance of good in them. They're not just 100% evil all the time. There's more to it than that. Just as the best heroes have those moral conflicts. It's not about, they're doing the right thing because they want to keep, their 100% loyalty bar going. But for those of you watching this, can you think of examples of games that have used morality sliders right? Are there any examples of that? Because I couldn't think of anything before I did this video. But we're going to wrap things up here because, as an interesting side note, my internet has been going on and off due to the storm that happened. Well, for those of you watching this in the future, this was a storm that happened in mid-March. So this could very well be a lost episode. We'll see what happens. But I'm going to wrap things up here. So again, to summarize, morality sliders really rose to popularity thanks to Knights of the Old Republic, and then being seen in action games, first-person shooters, RPGs, etc. And it just seemed like a very hokey way of trying to present a choice. Some of my favorite choices in games don't land on the good and evil spectrum. They are more in that shades of gray. And for fans of RPGs, you can probably point to games like Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactics Ogre, and I think there's probably a few other ones that really dealt with more of the moral conflict of war and battle, rather than just, again, pure good or pure evil. But like I said, it's definitely a mechanic that we've seen less and less of course, with exception to probably Mass Effect Andromeda, which I'm going to be curious to see what people think of that. I've been hearing very interesting things about what they think of the first few hours of it. So we'll see what happens in the future. But otherwise, thanks for watching today's Critical Thought. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you have a suggestion for a future Critical Thought, be sure to let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, thanks again for tuning in, and check back daily for more great content here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. We're not done just yet with today's Critical Thought. I just thought of one good example of kind of morality in video games I want to bring up, and that was from Fable. The original Fable, developed by Lionhead Studios and, of course, now infamous developer Pierre Molyneux, dealt with morality, but in a broader sense of the term. There were still good and evil choices in the game, but what made it different was that it dealt a lot more with hard choices. There were a lot of cases where you make a choice in this game, and even if you were good or bad, this choice would reverberate out to all parts of the game. And that's a really good example of a morality system that dealt more with these hard choices. The issue that I had with games like from BioWare with their morality systems was that it very much kept the game in flux for the majority of it. You're not impacting the greater story until you get to one of the major choices, typically near the end of the game. Such as in Knights of the Old Republic, when you had to choose between trying to free, what's saying, Bastilla, from being on the dark side or the light side. I know Jade Empire also had another one of those decisions. And this also goes back to the issue that I had with Telltale, that because the majority of their choices were only soft, they don't really change the game. And this goes back to the issue with morality sliders being more, I guess, gamey elements rather than impacting the story. And of course, as we talked about with our talk on hard and soft choices, every hard choice in a game creates another permutation or variant that the developer has to write for, which is why you don't see a lot of them in games. But when it comes to morality, instead of making these choices again, dealing with this sliding scale or bar, you can have choices that echo out from your choice, but aren't necessarily good or bad. And another big example of that, before this little extra part gets even longer, would be the Witcher series. And the Witcher has done a really good job of presenting these shades of gray, so that they're not always good, they're not always evil, but their impact will always affect the game in the short and long term. And that, I think, is where a morality system works the best, by actually giving it some kind of impact on the game space, and it doesn't exactly tie into the grand scheme of things. It affects what's important to that situation, but being evil or being good in one part is not going to magically affect everything for the next 30-40 hours of gameplay. But that choice may come back to impact things in small and large ways along your path going forward. But that's it for this quick, I guess, little addendum. Thanks for watching, and I think that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.